There was a city in southern China called Shenzhen. In the 1990s, it was barely a city at all, more of an experiment, a special economic zone carved out of fishing villages and rice paddies, separated from Hong Kong by a thin river and a very wide ambition. It was loud, chaotic, and electric with possibility. The perfect place to start a company that would one day be worth more than $500 billion. In 1998, 5 young men rented a small office there. They had second-hand computers, plastic chairs, and the particular hunger that comes from being smart people in a place that hasn't yet figured out how to reward smart people. Their leader, Ma Huateng, known internationally as Pony Ma, would become one of the most powerful men in the history of technology. They called their company Tencent, and what they built would change not just China, but the entire world's understanding of what a technology company could be. The founder, Pony Ma, was born in 1971 in Guangdong Province. From an early age, he displayed the quiet, methodical intensity that would define his leadership. He was not a showman, not a Steve Jobs type seducing the world with charisma. He was something rarer and, in the long run, more dangerous. A deeply analytical observer who could look at a product, understand exactly why people loved it, and build something slightly better. He studied computer science at Shenzhen University, graduated in 1993, and went to work at a paging company, learning how people communicate before the internet arrived, and changed everything. In 1998, he and 4 co-founders pooled roughly $60,000 in savings and registered Tencent Holdings Limited. Their first product was an instant messaging program called OICQ, essentially a Chinese clone of ICQ, the popular Israeli messaging service. They localized it for Chinese users and launched it in February 1999. People loved it immediately. The crisis that almost killed everything. AOL, which owned ICQ, sent Tencent a cease and desist letter. Tencent renamed their product QQ and kept going. That was the first near-death experience. The second was far more dangerous. When the dot-com bubble burst in 2000, Tencent found itself with millions of users and absolutely no idea how to make money from them. The company tried to sell itself. This is a fact Tencent's mythology tends to underplay, but it is true. At their lowest point, they approached multiple buyers asking for roughly $3 million for the entire business. Nobody wanted it. What saved Tencent was a South African media company called Naspers. In 2001, Naspers invested $32 million for a 46.5% stake. At the time, a reasonable bet on a promising but uncertain startup. In retrospect, one of the greatest investments in corporate history. That $32 million would eventually be worth, at peak valuation, somewhere around $175 billion. Naspers became one of the most valuable media companies in the world almost entirely because it believed in Tencent when no one else did, building an empire from a chat window. With Naspers' money as a lifeline, Tencent's engineers went to work, and here Pony Ma's genius became apparent. Instead of protecting QQ behind walls, he asked a different question. What do these 200 million users want to do when they're not chatting? The answer was everything. Games, music, news, shopping. And so, Tencent began building around QQ like a city growing around a train station. They built virtual avatars, cartoon characters users could dress up with accessories, and then started charging real money for those virtual goods. Chinese teenagers bought QQ coins at convenience stores and spent them on digital hats for their cartoon selves. The money was extraordinary. Tencent went public on the Hong Kong Stock Exchange in June 2004, raising $200 million and validating the peculiar genius of what Pony Ma had built. WeChat, the super app. By 2010, the future was clearly mobile. Smartphones were changing everything, especially in China, where hundreds of millions of people were accessing the internet for the first time. Not through desktop computers, but through cheap Android phones. Inside Tencent, an engineer named Alan Zhang understood what this meant. He was a legend in Chinese tech circles, having built Foxmail, one of China's most beloved email clients, essentially alone. In October 2010, he emailed Pony Ma. He wanted to build a new mobile messaging app from scratch. Ma said yes. 3 months later, in January 2011, WeChat launched. It started simply, a clean, fast messaging app. But Zhang had bigger ideas. Over the following years, WeChat evolved into what the Chinese call a super app. Want to message a friend? WeChat. Pay for groceries? WeChat Pay. Book a doctor, order food, hail a taxi, pay utility bills, apply for government services, send money to your parents, sign a contract, apply for a loan. All of it inside one app with one account. By 2023, WeChat had over 1.3 billion monthly active users. In China, it is not an app, it is infrastructure, as fundamental to daily life as electricity. Businesses cannot operate without a WeChat presence. Government services are delivered through it. The Western tech world spent years dismissing WeChat as something that could only work in China's unique environment. That dismissal masked an uncomfortable truth. WeChat had figured out something about human behavior that Facebook, Google, and Apple were still fumbling toward. Gaming and the investment machine. Gaming had always been part of Tencent's DNA, but in the 2000s they thought bigger. In 2011, Tencent acquired a majority stake in Riot Games, creators of League of Legends, for roughly $400 million. Within a few years, League of Legends was the most played PC game in the world, with over 100 million registered players and revenue in the billions. In 2016, Tencent acquired Supercell, makers of Clash of Clans, for $8.6 billion, the largest gaming acquisition in history at the time. They also invested in Epic Games, Activision Blizzard, and Ubisoft. But gaming was just one piece. Tencent became one of the most aggressive investment vehicles in the history of capitalism. Spotify, Tesla, Snapchat, Reddit, Meituan, JD.com, Sea Limited, Didai. Hundreds of companies across dozens of countries, all tied together by Tencent's logic of building an ecosystem where everything connects back to WeChat or QQ. By 2021, Tencent's market capitalization reached approximately $900 billion, making it one of the most valuable companies on Earth. The dragon meets the state. Then came the reckoning. In 2021, the Chinese government launched a sweeping crackdown on the tech sector. The motivations were multiple. Concerns about monopolistic behavior, data security, and the political influence of private technology billionaires. Jack Ma of Alibaba gave a speech criticizing regulators and largely disappeared from public view. Alibaba was fined $2.8 billion. Tencent was hit hard. A state-owned newspaper described online gaming as spiritual opium. The article sent Tencent stock plummeting. Miners were limited to 3 hours of gaming per week. Tencent implemented facial recognition to enforce the rules. Over roughly a year, from its 2021 peak to its late 2022 trough, Tencent lost approximately $500 billion in market capitalization, one of the largest destructions of stock market value in the history of capitalism. Pony Ma's personal fortune, which had reached nearly $70 billion, was cut roughly in half. The message from Beijing was clear. No private company, no matter how powerful, was beyond the reach of the state. The comeback and the lesson. But it is very hard to destroy a company with 1.3 billion daily users baked into the fabric of society. Tencent adapted. It pulled back from aggressive expansion, focused on its core businesses, and waited. The government, having made its point, began to ease restrictions. Gaming licenses were issued again. By 2023 and 2024, Tencent's stock had recovered significantly. The company was once again generating hundreds of billions in revenue and tens of billions in profit. The story of Tencent is in many ways the story of modern China. It is about what happens when you give hundreds of millions of first-time internet users tools that are genuinely designed for their context. It is about the uneasy, never-settled relationship between private enterprise and state power. And it is about a particular kind of competitive advantage. Not the most original ideas, but the deepest understanding of users, products embedded so thoroughly in daily life that leaving them becomes genuinely difficult. WeChat is not successful because it is the best chat app. It is successful because your doctor, your employer, your children's school, and the restaurant down the street are all on it. When a product becomes infrastructure, it achieves a permanence that goes far beyond consumer preference. Pony Ma, now in his early 50s, remains one of the wealthiest people in China. He is famously private, rarely gives interviews, and never performs the celebrity CEO role that Western tech culture demands. He builds, he watches, he adapts, the perfect embodiment of the company he created. Present everywhere, visible almost nowhere, and nearly impossible to dislodge. Tencent was founded with $60,000 and almost sold for $3 million. Today, it is worth hundreds of billions. It touches over 1 billion human beings every single day. And in Shenzhen, in a gleaming headquarters that looks nothing like the cramped office where 5 young men once pooled their savings, the dragon keeps breathing.